3, hit it!
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to today's Caffeine for the Soul. And I wanted to share a few stories today. And each story is a story of a time where I caught a glimpse of what we might call the default mode of human beings, what we might call innate mental health or innate well-being, what we might call our true nature. And in sharing the stories, I'm going to share how they didn't look like that to me at the time, and consequently, they didn't do for me what they could have done if I'd seen them for what they were. And hopefully that will all make sense by the time it ends. And we'll begin when I was at university. And if you've seen the TEDx talk, Why Aren't We Awesomer? You know one of the stories from my time at university where I was being sucked out of my dorm window by a giant vacuum cleaner from hell. Won't go into the full story here, but suffice it to say, I was having some mental health challenges. And tied up in that was one of my best friends. At around the same time, one of my best friends came back to school after the summer and was exhibiting some signs of unusual behavior. One of them I remember was that we did public auditions for the drama department when we came back to begin our sophomore year. And his audition was to walk out onto the stage and say the Lord's Prayer to himself. I, who art in heaven, hallowed be my name. And we thought at first, oh, he's being eccentric. He's being funny. He's being him. But in fact, it was it was the sort of first public sign that he'd had a break from reality, and that he really did think he was Jesus, and that David Bowie and I think it was David Bowie and David Byrne from the Talking Heads were going to fly in on Friday in a helicopter with suitcases full of cocaine and take him away to their private island. Or suffice it to say, he was struggling. And we got given a very dubious task to give a couple of scared college students, which was to keep him in one place until his parents could come down and sign commitment papers. And, we were told, A, it was completely for his safety, and B, he would never know that we were involved. And so we agreed to it. And he was rambling. I mean, he was talking, not quite word salad, but he was talking about this mental reality that he was clearly living inside of, that as far as we could tell had no bearing on any reality we knew. And then all of a sudden, for about 5 minutes, it was our friend. All of the stories stopped, and it was like a fever had broken. And he was just sitting in the room talking to us. And we didn't know what to do. And then the other guy who was with me said, "Is that you?" And he went back into his mental hallucinations, his other world. Now, I now look back on that and go, oh, that was his mental health. Despite the fact that he had this psychotic break from reality, schizoid break from reality, whatever we would call it, he was still in there, underneath it. And in a moment of quiet, it emerged. Now, I did not handle anything that was going on that year, my own mental trauma or his, very well. And so I was mandated it in order to stay in school to be in therapy. And one of the therapists was, I could tell he was a well-meaning guy. And he did things that kind of made me feel a little more comfortable, where we could meet in like a cafe over breakfast, or, we didn't have to meet in his office. And I was struggling, and talking to him was at times helpful. But one day I went to meet him, and I was just in high spirits. I didn't have a reason to be in high spirits. I just was. And there was a pretty girl in the cafe, and I went over and started chatting to her before our session. And, he saw it. He watched. And when I went over to sit down with him, he said, "Have you been faking it?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "Have you been faking?" Because at the time, I was unbelievably shy and found it very difficult to come out of my shell, except in rare moments. And he suddenly thought I'd been playing games and I'd been tricking people and that I was fine, because he'd seen in that moment when I was talking to that girl in that cafe, I was fine. Now, again, had he understood, that was a glimpse of my mental health, of my well-being, of my true nature still sitting there underneath the mountains of scary thinking that I was living inside of. The third one, and the one that probably had the biggest influence on the direction of my life, was the first time I read a Tony Robbins book. And so in the late 80s, I read Unlimited Power. And I worked at bookshops while I lived in London, and Unlimited Power, one of the guys said, "Oh, you got to read this. It's the hot new book from America." And I read it, and I thought it was interesting. And then in chapter 2, I think it was chapter 2, he had a little thought experiment. He said, if the inside of your head is really noisy, and the inside of my head was really noisy, he said, look up and find the volume knob and reach out and turn it down, the volume knob for that voice inside your head. And I did. And to my shock, I got quiet. Not like a little quiet. I got preternaturally quiet, spooky quiet. And I experienced a feeling of just overwhelmingly beautiful peace. Now, if the next line in the book had been, if you're feeling an overwhelming sense of peace that makes sense of biblical sounding phrases like the peace that passeth all understanding, you're glimpsing your true nature. That's you, that is. That's who you are. That is your innate mental health. That is your innate well-being. My life might have gone in a different direction. But what the next line in the book said was, if you think that was helpful, I've got 30 more techniques you can use to do this. And so for the next 18 years, I immersed myself in NLP and similar psychological technologies, thinking that that amazing experience I'd had was an achievement. It was a result, not seeing that it was my nature. So I've got a simple assignment for you, a simple piece of homework if you want to try it, which is over the next few days, reflect back on your life and see if you can find some glimpses of health, glimpses of the default setting, glimpses of true nature. Now, you might not have thought that's what they were at the time, but moments where you or someone else suddenly and for no reason found themselves at peace, found themselves quiet, found themselves healthy, even if their norm was a particularly unhealthy normal. And I just want you to consider, what if each one of the examples that you come up with, each one of the glimpses, really was a glimpse of what is always already there underneath the noise of our personal thinking? And if you see that, you may begin to connect some dots that will create a very different picture of who we are, how the mind works, and what's possible. Have fun, learn heaps, and happy exploring. I'll talk with you soon.